The Story of Maple, Part 1, Before the Sealing of the Black Mage. Chapter 2, The World of Grandis. Grandis was one of the three worlds created by the Overseers, separated from Maple World and Tynerum by a dimensional barrier. Grandis was a much different place from Maple World, with 1 year in Grandis being roughly equal to 10 years on Maple World. Because of the countless wars over the eons, Grandis was also known as the Graveyard of Warriors. Similar to Maple World, Grandis was a planet with several moons, one of which was named Verdel. Grandis was split into 3 regions: Western Grandis, Central Grandis, and Eastern Grandis. Grandis was home to many species, but the 3 largest were the Flora, the Nova, and the Anima. Following the end of the ancient war, many gods who had once ruled across Grandis were sealed away at the hands of the adversaries, such as Satyrus, the devil dragon. Without Satyrus to protect them, his followers, the Black Nova, were hunted down by those whom they had once subjugated. The surviving cultists eventually made a decision that resulted in their horns, wings, and tails being lost to both them and their descendants, ensuring that they would not be identified as Black Nova. Afterwards, the survivors fled to a remote part of Grandis and founded a hidden village for their people. Meanwhile, after Mitra, the sun god, was defeated by the adversaries, the Celestials moved his body to a temple somewhere on Grandis. With the fall of the ancient gods, the Celestials lost their powers and remained trapped on Grandis, settling in High Mountain and founding an order of Templars who guarded the holy sword Azor. At the same time, various faiths gathered at the Scar of the Earth, the site of the final battle against the gods, which had been carved with the blade of the divine. Amongst those who had gathered, the strongest was a priest named Masra, a worshipper of Mitra. Masra used his strength to overpower the priests of all other religions, and founded the holy city of Cernium as a temple dedicated to Mitra, also founding the Order of Mitra in the process. Many people gathered together in Cernium, including the followers of the sun god and those who merely wished to flock towards Masra and his power. In the process of establishing governance over these various factions, a great war was waged that resulted in the establishment of Cernium as its own nation with its own laws. Masra then became the first king of Cernium, serving also as the first high priest, and began the tradition of members of the royal family carving the pattern of the sun god upon their foreheads, which reflected their dedication to Mitra. Despite Cernium being established as a nation, a large number of believers who worshipped the sun god soon began to fragment into different sects, each creating different practices of worship. Of these sects, one began worshipping Mitra as Spisa, based on the sun's position at sunset, believing that Spisa brought flaming passion. Those who followed Spisa became known as the Flame Priests, who chose to honor their god with loud explosions using gunpowder, meant to mimic their flame powers that were lost to them after Mitra's disappearance. Another sect worshipped Mitra as Nerota, claiming she brought hope at dawn and dusk. The followers of Nerota, the Dawn Priests, believed that their god's spirit lived inside everyone, for which they would gather together in order to pray to each other, even using a mirror to pray to their own reflections if they were alone. They also believed that Nerota only appeared to those with a tranquil heart in the form of a dark blue deer, with the sun rising between its antlers if one stared long enough without blinking, for which they trained themselves not to blink in order to show their devotion. As a result of these internal divisions, Cernium was engulfed in civil war as these various sects attempted to gain control over the city. At one point, the Order of Nerota was able to gain footing in the city, resulting in them creating a temple dedicated to their god. In the end, however, Masra and the Order of Mitra became the dominant power in Sernium, thus ending the civil war. Though many hoped for peace to return, external enemies began invading the holy city, which had grown weak from the infighting. With the land that Sernium was built upon, the scar of the earth, being a holy site for many gods, not simply Mitra, those who hoped for the return of their respective gods continued to gather in Sernium. As the outside threat continued besieging the city, Masra chose to step down as high priest and appointed a new high priest to rule in his place, after which he continued ruling solely as the king. By separating religious and state duties, Masra was able to focus on the war effort. However, the war continued endlessly, and many citizens began turning against Masra and his ineffectual leadership. Even after Masra was succeeded by other kings, the infighting continued for centuries. Over time, the various sects of Mitra began to lose sight of their origins and came to believe that their gods, Spisa and Nerota, were entirely separate gods from Mitra. As a result, the orders of Spisa and Nerota were viewed as heretics by the Order of Mitra, which continued attempting to push out the followers of all religions except their own. After the fall of the Black Nova, the most powerful race became the Flora of Central Grandis, magic users with brilliant red wings and mastery over the mitocrystals that they used to cast their magic. Through their wings, they channeled the flow of mana into the mitocrystals embedded in the back of their hands, allowing them to cast powerful spells. The Flora were a caste-based society, with the God King on top, followed by the gods, the priests, and the powerless commoners on the bottom. The last God King of the Flora had once been a kind man, protected by the Knights of the Einherjar. Several years into his reign, however, he inexplicably underwent a dramatic change of personality. Many of his subjects, including the knights, were alarmed by his madness, unsure of its cause. Unbeknownst to them, however, the God King's insanity was brought about by an illness instilled into him by his own son, Prince Jaren Darmur, who hoped to break the balance of life on Grandis in order to awaken as the new transcendent of life. In his belligerence, the God King attempted to incite a war against the other races of Grandis. A faction of Flora opposed the God King's mandate and asked that he strive for peace with the other races. However, when it was revealed that the faction had plans to share their power with the commoners, they were accused of treason. They had their wings and magic stripped, and they were then exiled. They became known as the Verdant Flora, while the ruling faction became known as the High Flora. Within the Knights of the Einherjar, there was similar growing dissent. One of the God King's most loyal knights, Adelaide, struggled with her loyalty to the God King and her own morality in waging an unjust war against the other races of Grandis. When she declared that she could not follow him into battle, the God King ordered her arrest and threw her into prison. In exile, the Verdant Flora struggled to create their own society without their powers. Eventually, the god of the Verdant Flora, called as such due to his caste rank, discovered a way to combine technology with their residual crystal magic, allowing them to regain much of their old power through mechanical blue wings. Their god also created a powerful artifact called the Elder Crystal, upon which he imprinted his consciousness and his power. Through unknown means, he was also able to create a pocket dimension in Maple World, which would later be known as the Sanctuary of the Ancient God, through which he could speak with one who had fused with him through the Elder Crystal.